Hello DC Downsizers. I'm happy to hear that Downsize DC is going to give each of you who contribute to Downsize DC a copy of my book, Dishonest Money, Financing the Road to Ruin. Rather than have me stand here and tell you about the book, I thought it'd make a little bit more sense to just use a couple recent radio interviews. I've added some images to the radio interview so the video is a little bit more lively. I hope you find the information useful. More importantly, I hope it encourages you to donate to Downsize DC.
2009, after 6 years of research, he published Dishonest Money, Financing the Road to Ruin. Dishonest Money explains how the elite are using our fraudulent monetary system to weaken the United States. This book has received great reviews from experts and laymen alike for simplifying and condensing this large and extremely important topic. Corruption on a grand scale. I've never seen it like this in my lifetime, and I've been on this planet a few years now. Joe, what is your answer to that, sir?
Well, the system's doing exactly what it was designed to do. The primary lever of power in any society is money. So a long time ago, while everybody else was trying to figure out how they could either earn more money or borrow more money or even steal more money, there was a clever group, if you want to call them clever, who decided, well, why don't we just figure out a way to create money? And if we can figure out a way to create this money and convince everybody else to use it, then we're going to have more power than anybody else in the world, because everybody else will still be trying to earn, borrow, or steal what we have the exclusive right to create. And that's what we have with our, what I call our fraudulent monetary system. What we have is a privileged class of individuals who are able to simply create money out of thin air, and then they loan that money into existence. And through that process, they're able to control all the major levers of power in our society. And I try to put it in a framework like this. I say, if I wanted to control the direction of a country, if you gave me control over education, I would have a tremendous amount of power. I could get the kids when they were young. I could start indoctrinating them the way I wanted them to think and behave and believe. But if you take the money away from me, then I lose that power. If you put me in control of a nation's military, I'd have a tremendous amount of power. I would have the full force of the military, but if you take the money away from me, then that military becomes useless because the tanks don't run on water and the soldiers need food and the guns don't shoot green peas. So that it requires money to have any bite in that military. Same thing with the government. Give me control over a government. I can determine trade policies. I can determine social policies. I can determine health care policies. Gee, think about that. But take the money away, and then that government doesn't have anything. So this is why I always go back to money being the primary lever of power. The people who created this system understood that. There's the famous saying by Mayor Amschel Rothchild, who said, "Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws." Well, there you have it. That's a very arrogant but concise summary of where we are right now.
As these people, is this just a feel-good thing now where people are being urged to, quote, buy gold so they can actually go over and pet their money and see where it's sitting in a box somewhere? Or is this a real good, solid investment idea?
I think it's a good security blanket. I think it's a good insurance policy. I don't I can't give investment advice, but I know of absolutely no case in history where a fiat currency collapsed and gold and silver was not accepted in trade.
Very true.
So this is the key here is if you're buying it to make money, and by make money I mean increase the dollar-denominated value, that's not the reason I would be getting into it. I would be getting into it for the same reason you have storable food, or you have water filters, or you have any other kind of insurance against some kind of calamity, some kind of temporary calamity that emerges when the existing system falls apart. Something else will eventually replace it, but in that interim, it's a real good idea to have something that has been considered money for thousands and thousands of years, and not because the government decreed it so, but because people chose it.
Joe, you'd like to tell me if, how we might be able to get further information, follow up on your thoughts in this area. People have further inquiries.
If you can learn the different kinds of money, you will immediately realize the power that these people have as a result of the monetary system that they have forced us to live under. And as soon as enough people realize this, just as in 1836 when we threw out the Second Bank of the United States with the help of Andrew Jackson, we will be able to eliminate this central banking power that's being used to pervert our government and steer our entire nation in a direction that nobody ever asked to go in.
Today I have with me the author of what I have described as the most important book you're likely to read in your lifetime, and that author is Joe Plummer. Joe, are you there?
I'm here, Mark.
Excellent. So, Joe, this book, Dishonest Money, which I am such a huge advocate of, you put out a second edition, is that right?
That's correct.
Well, tell me what's changed. Tell me about, I guess, first about Dishonest Money for somebody who hasn't read the book. What is it that they can expect?
They can expect to learn about what is truly, no exaggeration, the largest fraud ever perpetrated against mankind. That is not an exaggeration. It's not hyperbole.
Doesn't sound like it to me.
The real rulers are the ones who control the creation of money.
Yeah, doesn't that that makes perfectly good sense to people if they get to hear it. Like, who in the world makes the money? Because I think people think that their governments do, but the United States government doesn't print money.
No. Well, technically the Treasury prints it, but it prints it at the behest of the Federal Reserve.
It says Federal Reserve note right at the top.
Exactly. And the Federal Reserve is a privately owned banking cartel, essentially. The bankers got together and wrote the legislation and then used the government to pass and enforce that legislation. And one of the arguments I like to give to people is you wouldn't want defense contractors writing and implementing our nation's foreign policy.
No, because they're liable to want to blow people up to sell more bombs and tanks and guns.
Right. So it isn't really a good idea to have bankers writing and managing our nation's monetary policy.
Now, I knew what you were talking about the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve creates money, and I was a little unclear prior to reading your book. I attempted to read The Creature from Jekyll Island, but I found it to be such a tome, and I don't want to disparage the book because I think it's so important, but I found it to be somewhat dry and very, 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 very long. I found that Dishonest Money it's a light read relatively, and it's not very long, right?
I really wrote it for people who are maybe not up for sitting down and going through a 600-page book as an introduction. G. Edward Griffin's book, I can't say enough good about it. Mm-hmm. I think it's a fantastic book. The research is impeccable. It's laid out great, but for the average person, it's probably a bit intimidating to try and just get into it just because of its length. Then, in addition to that, you're dealing with the fact that it's a new topic. It's something you're not really familiar with.
I try to imagine how many people have read G. Edward Griffin's the Creature from Jekyll Island. They said, this is such an important book. I have to get this into the hands of so many of my friends. And that those books have been handed out, and they haven't been read, and they haven't been read because it's just such an intimidating book. And to me, your book, and I cannot stress how relatively easy this is to understand. I didn't understand how the Federal Reserve System worked, how money was made until I read your book, and it made it so easy for me to understand. I mean, I had a general idea, but I just didn't know the specifics. And unless you can speak with some facility about the specifics, people are going to be like, I'm not sure I believe what you're talking about. I'm sure that the government is printing the money and it's not some banking cartel. What are you talking? Federal Reserve sounds federal to me. That people will be skeptical. But if you put this book in their hands, it's a much better chance, I believe, that they'll read it, enjoy it, and understand it.
It's really difficult for anybody who's interested in this topic to put off reading this book, because it's literally a one-day book.
Yeah. As I said, this is the most important book that anyone can read. And I mean anyone. I think that anybody who over the age of 14 should read this book, understand this book. I consider it so important, and I think that this should be, if you love somebody, try to get them to read this book is kind of how I feel, and I've done that.